So I got up with a little bit of urgency, but I certainly wasn't running around the corner. And I said, "Sarah, what's going on?" And she said, "I just went to grab my shoes and something was looking at me." Now, my wife has a very vivid imagination. This isn't the first time she said something like this. And she said, "I think it's a snake in the garage." And so I went in the garage and I looked at our shoe rack, and there's a big turtle underneath it. Um, and we had noticed that our mulch kept getting displaced out in front of our house every night, and we couldn't figure out why. But I think the turtle was going in there to sleep every night. But at some point, she had just opened the garage door as she was grabbing her shoes, so he must have been in there overnight. And there he was. So we moved everything out of the way and got him into a big basket and safely relocated him.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the good fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. Are you planning to travel with your group sometime soon? If so, please consider my sponsor, Kaleidoscope Adventures, a full-service tour company specializing in student group travel. With a former educator as its CEO, Kaleidoscope Adventures is dedicated to changing student lives through travel, and they offer high-quality service and an attention to detail that comes from more than 25 years of student travel experience. Trust Kaleidoscope's outstanding staff to focus on your group's one-of-a-kind adventure so that you can focus on everything else. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio-on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you knew one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now on to my next guest, Robert Ambrose. Hi, Robert. How are you?
I'm well, Mark. How are you tonight?
I'm doing okay. We're for just to put a timestamp on this, it is the end of May 2020, and we're still in the COVID lockdown in some states. Some states are opening up, but we're definitely in the middle of the pandemic still, and so all of our answers are going to be colored by that a little bit, I'm sure. But Robert, before we let me just have you introduce yourself for the listeners.
Sure. I'm Robert Ambrose. I'm the director of band at Georgia State University and the founder and music director of the Atlanta Chamber Winds in Atlanta and the National Chamber Winds in Washington, D.C.
So, Robert, let's just, before we get into what you're doing now, let's go back to the beginning. What's your musical origin story? How'd you get started as a musician?
I would imagine it's unique when compared to other people that you've interviewed. I'll let the cat out of the bag right at the beginning. I've never played a wind instrument nor played in a band in my life.
Really?
Yeah. So my background is as a guitar player. I grew up in a town called Wethersfield, Connecticut, just outside of Hartford. Yeah, our music program in the middle and high school had a very robust guitar program. And the band and choir were also good, but the guitar program was incredible. I mean, there were class guitar classes of 20 or 30 or 40 of us. In ninth grade, I made the freshman rock band. We went into a recording studio and made a CD. There was a semi-professional group called Onyx, Onyx, affiliated with the high school. So the guitar program was a really cool, robust kind of thing. It was run by a guy named John Sayles, who I would probably call my first teacher. I mean, he taught me everything I knew about playing guitar, although he never taught me privately. He was the group guitar guy, and he ran the rock groups. But he put us in the recording studio at 13 years old, 14 years old. And my whole approach to music nowadays has been informed by that, I think. And I think approaching 52 years old, I'm realizing more and more how much that background sort of informs the way I hear and how I view color and rhythm and things like that. But so I grew up playing guitar, rock guitar. In college, I went to Boston College and pursued an undergraduate degree in computer science. And while I was there, I was connected with a guy named Seb Boniuto, who was the director of bands there and still is. And he ran a jazz band, and I went and auditioned for him. And I'd never played jazz, and he said, "Yeah, I'll take you, sure." And so then I played jazz with him for 4 years at Boston College, while also playing in a rock band most Friday and Saturday nights. Finished my degree in computer science. Uh, Traveled Europe for about 6 weeks on a Eurail pass. Came home, and for the first time in my life, I had no idea where I was headed. I knew I wasn't interested in computer science. I really probably should have taken some time after high school. Like, a gap year didn't exist in the 1980s when I was in college. No one really did that, or if they did, they certainly didn't call it a gap year, and it wasn't something that's labeled like it is now. But I came home and got pretty sad, I guess is maybe the right word to say, and did some soul searching. And I was living in Boston at the time with some friends. And I went to New England Conservatory and I met with the chair of the music ed program. And I said, "Hey, I'm a guitar player with an undergraduate degree in computer science, and I think I want to teach music." And they politely declined, as well I probably would have. I don't know how well you know Boston, but Boston Conservatory is not too far from New England Conservatory. So my next stop was there, met with the head of the music ed program there, and got the same response. And then I went to Boston University, and there was a gentleman there named Richard Caldwell. And if you know anything about music ed instrumental, he wrote the book that everybody uses, The Teaching of Instrumental Music. Richard Caldwell, and then the second edition was Caldwell and Goolsby. And he had just moved there from a long career at University of Illinois and I think Northern Colorado. So he was brand new, and I told him my story, and he said, "I don't know why, Ambrose, but I'm going to take a chance on you. You're in the program." So he took me into a master's degree in music ed with an undergraduate degree in computer science and guitar chops. And then it was up to me. And I took 3 years to finish that program. And I learned a lot in that program. And I was really connected to him, and he was really connected in the music ed world. Eric Rombach Kendall, who's now at the University of New Mexico, has been for about 2 decades, was the band director at Boston University at the time. And he and I got real close, and he taught me a lot. And Caldwell and Rombach Kendall together got me private conducting lessons with Frank Battisti, which really changed the course of my life. So I started taking lessons with Battisti. It's actually a funny story. I'll just share it if I have a second. Back then, we didn't have email or anything. I got the courage to call him, and I called him, and he picked up the phone, and I said, "Mr. Battisti, I'm Robert Ambrose. I'm a graduate student in music education at Boston University, and I would love to have one lesson with you. Your Eric Rombach Kendall said you might be willing to teach me." And he said, "Sure, prepare the Holst First Suite and come." And we set a date. I don't know, it was maybe 2 weeks later or something like that. So I had no idea how to study a score. I'd never done it before. So I did what I thought you should do, which was I got a score and a recording, and I listened to the recording over and over and over and over and over. And I showed up to Battisti's office, and I sat on his couch, and he sat next to me, and I opened up the score, and he closed it, and he said, "Before we start, what year was this piece written?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Okay, come back when you know, leave your check." And that was my first lesson with him. And what a lesson that was. It was less than a minute long. So I left and I told Eric, "I blew it, man. I can't ever go back there." I mean, he took my check. I think it was like $40 or something for an hour lesson. I mean, I couldn't believe how little he was charging, but the lesson was only like 30 seconds anyway. So Eric said, I'm gonna show you the ropes here. So he took me under his wing and really showed me what to do. I got the courage to go back to Battisti maybe a month or two later. And then I studied with him the rest of my time at Boston University and for most of the time that I was a public school band director up there. And that was extraordinary. I would see him, I think it was either Monday or Tuesday nights, I can't remember, at like 7 o'clock, and the lessons were always so long. I mean, it would be 10 o'clock before he'd say, "Oh, well, I think we've done enough today." I mean, he would just give so much of his time, and he taught me about beauty and how to see the world beautifully, and he taught me about courage, and he taught me about staying power, and so many things. And he taught me about music too. But it was those other things that really resonated with me that stay with me till these days. So I've sort of gone ahead a little bit. So after I finished at Boston University, I took a job at a small town in central Massachusetts called Munson, Monson, Munson High School, where I did the chorus and the band. And I was playing in a rock band in Boston and didn't want to move. So I commuted 80 miles each way every day from Boston to central Massachusetts. So that was a doozy of a commute. And we'd have 6 a.m. rehearsals before school. So that was a great 2 years to learn and grow. And I was able to do some good things there, which I was proud to be able to do anything good because I had such a different background. And I never played in a band. And certainly never sung in a choir. And I was having to do those things. And if I looked back now at my teaching, I'd probably be mortified. But I made a difference there. I did make a difference. I was able to raise the standard, and I was proud of the work that I did in my first couple of years. Although it probably was not great work. After that, I went to a school called Norwood High School in suburban Boston, which had a really good music program. Taught there for 3 years, left to go to Northwestern University to pursue my PhD in music ed. And just before I was getting ready to go there, I contacted Mallory Thompson. Actually, it was more than just before. It's probably in February. Contacted Mallory Thompson and I said, "Hey, I'm coming in as a new PhD music ed student, and I'd love to have lessons with you." I mean, it's so funny how naive you are when you're young. Like Mallory Thompson's going to give me conducting lessons, and she was very polite. And she said, "I want you to come do my conducting workshop in July, and if things go well, I'll let you sit in on studio class." Great. So I went and did the conducting workshop. At the end of the week, she said, "It'd be great to have you in studio class. So work that into your schedule. You're not a conducting major. I can't give you podium time. I can't teach you, but you can come to studio class every week." Fabulous. So school started. I was, hardcore music ed stuff, and realized really, really quickly that it wasn't for me. It just wasn't where my passion lied. And they're in quarters up there, 10 weeks, 3 10-week quarters. So maybe 3 weeks into the program, Mallory Thompson said, "Look, I don't want to tell you what to do, but I think you're better suited for conducting, and I wish you would audition for the program and switch over." So I did. So after 1 quarter in music ed, I switched over to conducting and did my doctorate with her in wind conducting, and played in a rock band with some guys from the Chicago Symphony. Had some great gigs in Chicago, continuing to play guitar, playing rock music. And then I was lucky enough to land the job at Georgia State, and I've been there for 19 years.
Just to kind of go back over your story, I want to ask you a couple of questions here. So it's really, really a great lesson for young listeners, or maybe someone who has a kid who it doesn't fit the profile of what a future band director or even a future orchestra director or choir director looks like. And it's so possible to fall in love with something that's not your main instrument, because we're teaching music after all. And, just because I played the trumpet as an undergraduate, it doesn't give me any sort of special powers about wind instruments. And so I think that's a really good lesson. I'm curious about that as a young person. Were you daunted by that when you went back? And was the wind thing a problem when you got to Boston?
Everything was a problem when I got there. I had no business being there.
Uh-huh.
No business. So I was living with a guy named Ted Atkatz, who a few years later would become the principal percussionist of the Chicago Symphony.
That's a good gig.
He was a student there at Boston University. And I don't even remember how we ended up as roommates or how we even met the first time. But we played in a rock band together. And I remember, I remember this like it was 15 minutes ago, coming home to him and saying, okay, so I've been at BU for a week and I keep hearing these two words and I have no idea what people are talking about. I hear the word oboe and bassoon.
Oh, geez.
What are they talking about? And I'll never, ever, he looked at me and went, this is hopeless. That was his reaction. This is hopeless. And so everything was a struggle. A theory professor named Jerry Wheel gave me private theory lessons because I'd never had a theory lesson. Nothing.
Oh, that's right, because you had no undergrad degree in music.
Yeah, I had done I think a 5 or 12 week summer session at Berklee School of Music at some point during my undergrad, I think between my sophomore and junior years. So when they gave me the theory placement test, they're seeing all these like jazz notations underneath, and they're like, who is this guy? I mean, they had every reason to just write me off and kick me down the road. But Jerry Wheel, bless his heart, man, he took me and he gave me private theory lessons every week. And Caldwell, took me under his wing and said, I believe in you, even though there's no reason he should have. So, yeah, all of that stuff was a struggle. Everything was. And, I still sort of feel like an imposter in this world because I came into it so late. And when I'm doing an honor band and there's 17 and 18, like I did the Texas All-State Band this year, and to see these kids playing their instruments at that age and thinking, dude, at your age, I was like playing rock guitar and transcribing solos in my bedroom, and that was it. I have such incredible, like this is genuine. I'm not just saying this. Such admiration for musicians and wind players and percussionists and string players and pianists and their craft and their ability to play the instruments and the technique never ceases to amaze me. So getting back, everything was hard. And I'm sure I got a chance there that I didn't deserve. And Mallory Thompson, what on earth ever would have compelled her to take me in that program? I just don't know. I mean, they must have seen something. I don't know what it was, but Mallory's no fool. She's not going to waste her time on somebody she doesn't believe in. But so everything was a struggle. And at Northwestern, I will never forget showing up there and hearing the horn players in the second band and saying, those are the best horns I've ever heard in my life. And it was the bottom of the section, which at the bottom of the section in Gail Williams' studio is still world class, right? So everything was a struggle. And it's only become comfortable for me maybe in the last few years. And I'm in my, just finished my 19th year of college teaching.
All right, you just unloaded even more questions on me here. Okay. All right, so let's talk through the Boston University thing. So you had to take some music ed classes. Did you have to do like all of the the methods classes and all of that stuff?
Never. No, I didn't take any of them because I didn't have to do the undergraduate sequence. I was a graduate student. I mean, you're getting the point here. There's no way I should have been there. And I just took lessons and sat down with a great player on every instrument.
Wow.
And let's be honest, when I took my first teaching job, thank goodness I didn't have to teach beginners. I probably would have been able to do it.
You'd have managed.
I would have managed fine, but it would not have been exceptional. I was fortunate that I was in a school system where they started in 4th grade. So by the time they got to me, they'd been playing a few years. And I don't want to say I was incompetent. I mean, I knew fingerings and I could tell them how to make it a sound and things like that. But I didn't take those kinds of classes. I took the Masters in Music Ed curriculum.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So you were doing the research in music ed and those kind of courses.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I took classes like teaching classroom music and things like that were cross-listed between undergraduate and graduate numbers, but like methods classes, no. Undergraduate theory sequence, no way. Undergraduate history sequence, never. I never had that stuff.
Did you have to do a theory placement exam, a history placement exam?
History, no. Theory, yes, and that's what I referenced earlier, where I
Yeah, take the private
so
lessons.
badly that they took pity on me and begged a tenured full professor to teach me privately. It's funny now. I can't imagine what would have compelled him to say yes, because the score was so low. I don't even think. I think it was like virtually, you know, the bottom of the bucket, and because I just didn't have the training at all. And I remember telling Caldwell, like, "Do I have to take this? I'm not going to be able to answer anything." He said, "Yeah, you need to take it, Ambrose. It'll be fine." And of course, it wasn't fine. But Jerry Wheel spent so much time with me, and look, I don't want to discredit my own work. I worked really hard to get where to get up to speed on those things. But man, when I hear people say, "Oh, I have some deficiencies in my training," I say, "I'll tell you about deficiencies." And if I've had any amount of success, and I don't know how a person defines that, but if I've had any, I had every disadvantage in the world. I just had a few people who took a chance on me, and I worked hard. And so, if I truly, if I can do this, I honestly have to say anyone can.
If I just make an observation from listening to your story is, you talked about reaching out to, was it New England Conservatory first? Do I recall correctly?
That's correct.
And then you reached out to Richard Caldwell, and then you reached out to the theory professor for help. You asked in each of those cases, and you keep saying, "I'm surprised they said yes," but I think so many people are afraid to even make the ask.
Yeah, well, I asked Caldwell. I didn't ask the theory professor. They assigned him to me.
Oh, okay.
But nonetheless, yes. I mean, agreed. I did have the courage to just show up at probably naivete to show up at New England Conservatory and just ask. And they were really polite. No one was, I don't know what they said after I left, but they were very polite to my face. But yeah, the point is taken. I definitely did say, this is what I want to do, and I went after it. So
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I take away from that as I listen to your story. So a couple more things I want to ask. You just brought up the idea of imposter syndrome and feeling like an imposter. And that's something that for most of my career I've dealt with. It's only in the last year or two, and basically it coincides with me teaching beginners again.
Yeah.
Has that begun to go away? I just want to touch on that because I think there's a lot of musicians, creative people, teachers who suffer from imposter syndrome, and kind of how do you deal with that?
Well, I don't think I face it as much now. And I think I've gotten to a point in my life where I feel comfortable in my skin. So I'm not sure that it was any musical developments that pushed me away from worrying about that stuff as much as it just was human development. I didn't suddenly say, okay, I figured all this out, because honestly, the older I get, the more I realize there's so little I know. I'm actually going in the opposite direction in terms of feeling like I understand music. As the world gets wider, and maybe we'll talk about this later, I travel a lot. I fly like 125,000 miles a year. So I see a lot of this world, and I realize how small I am in it. So I don't think the imposter syndrome, I've become comfortable with who I am, and I've become comfortable making decisions, and I'm beginning to have comfort with people saying, I disagree with you and I don't like what you're saying there. That's been very difficult for me, especially of late as I've been involved in some kind of high profile things here. It's, you can't please everybody. And when you try to, you please no one and you drive yourself crazy. So I think if you have strong ethics and goodness in your heart and a desire to help, you'll make the right decisions. And a lot of that's come to me through being a dad. I changed completely when I had kids. I changed completely when I met my wife, and then again when I had children. My wife taught me kindness and generosity and selflessness. It's natural for her. She wakes up and it's just like there's a piccolo playing in the background and butterflies. Like that's how she is. It's hard work for me every day to be kind. Well, that's unfair. Sometimes it's hard for me to be kind like she is naturally. So I softened when I met her, and when I had children, I melted. It's funny, when you're at a place for so long, I have students who were there 15 years ago that say, "Oh my God, he was terrifying," and people are like, "Oh, he's not terrifying anymore." It just changes you. So having kids, being a husband has changed me fundamentally to the point where I feel a greater sense of comfort in who I am. So I think that has helped to sort of nullify or mollify this imposter syndrome. And I think everyone has it. I think people who say they don't have it, I don't want to accuse them of lying. I think that they might just not be self-aware and know that they really do have those feelings. They might just be pushing them down. Russ Dagan was the principal clarinet in the Milwaukee Symphony forever, and he was the clarinet professor at Northwestern when I was there. And Mallory brought him in to speak to our conductors. And I remember him saying something. This stuck with me. Of all the things he said, my clarinet students create this musical monster in their head that they try to live up to. And that person is the amalgamation of every great clarinetist they've ever heard play with all of the best traits of each of them. So it's this person's tone, it's this person's rhythm, it's this person's articulation, it's this person's phrasing. And they've created a monster that's all of those people together that they can never live up to. But in reality, that person doesn't even exist. So that was a really eye-opening experience for me when he said that. It really hit me hard. Like, I think maybe we all do that.
Yeah, I know as a composer, there's I think I'm trying to think of who the musicologist. That's the name's on the tip of my tongue, but he termed it the anxiety of influence. It's Schoenberg looking at the German stem, the German composers, and saying, "Oh, I have to do something completely different because I can't live up to that." I'll come up with that musicologist in a bit, but it's that anxiety of influence thing of all those that have come before you.
Well, and some do it to themselves. Look at Sibelius. I mean, 30 years he didn't write. He's just crippled by his own success.
Mm-hmm.
I think it could be other people or even you. You can do it. It can be self-imposed.
Sure. Absolutely. Strauss, Joseph Strauss.
Oh, okay.
He wrote an atonal music book with a green cover that has haunted my grad years. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So, this imposter syndrome thing is really interesting to me. It's something we haven't talked about in the podcast a lot. But I think you're right. It's in everybody a little bit, right? Because I know I look at other band directors doing great things, or look at other composers doing great things, and sometimes it's like, oh, I'm never going to be that. But I'm not them. I'm me.
Yeah, most people I know are insecure about their music making. Mm-hmm. Even really great artists that I know. I think we all have it. I think that's part of what makes people great is that sort of
striving to be better all the time.
Pushing, yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I'm hearing as I'm listening to you talk, Robert, is that your humility comes through. You keep talking about how you're not sure how this all happened, but you're surrounded by great people at each stop. And more importantly and more telling to me is that all these people have taken an interest in you and are helping you, which means that they've seen something in you. And I want you to talk about that idea of mentoring and nurturing students who you see something in.
Sure. It's one of my joys of life is mentoring students. It's funny. I don't know where you are in your life, but you hit a point where you. I'm a humble guy, and it's hard to say what I'm about to say, but I sort of need to say it in order to continue the rest of it. There's a point where you can't be everything to everyone who wants you to be something to them. Don't have enough hours in the day to give everybody what they need and what they want. So at some point you have to make a choice. And what I've done is, I've put my family right in the front. And then I've said, I have a group of graduate conducting students that are going to get a lot of my time, and my wind ensemble at Georgia State, and they're going to get a lot of my time. But there may not be a lot of other people that get a lot of the time, because once you start doing that, you're diffused to the point where you're just a nub. There's just nothing left. So I say that, but I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth, because at the same time, I do like to give, and I do give. If someone asks to see me, I'll give them some time, but I have to give most of my time to the people that are forefront in my life right now, which is my family, my graduate students, and my wind ensemble, and my professional groups. But they don't really need much care. They sort of just run themselves. So mentoring young students, I mean, there's maybe nothing I enjoy more than that part of it. And I learned a couple of years ago, and I was afraid to say this out loud, and now I'm saying it on a podcast. I think that I just enjoy connecting with people, and music is the way that my life has gone in order to make that happen, in order to enable it. And that's not to say that the music isn't important. It's life or death as far as I'm concerned. Music matters that much, and I think we're going to see that in the next few months here, by the way. But it's the connection between people that means so much to me, and part of that is mentorship, and part of that is just leading by example and being the person in rehearsal that I want to be. That's prepared and has a compelling idea of the music and is kind and elevates students, doesn't demean them, and helps everybody to play their very best, and uses their intellect to make the product better, not thinking I have the only point of view. So while I do like to mentor in traditional ways, I like to mentor just through the way I behave, and hopefully that shows people a way to go about this in a good way. And I'm sure most conductors, when they do honor bands, they get praise afterwards and things. But I tend to get deep, heartfelt kinds of letters and notes from people, and I think they sense a genuineness to the way I approach music and the way I approach people. And I care about people. I care about music, but I care about people. So if I can mentor through that, maybe that's even more important than musical mentorship or the other types of things that you would traditionally think of when you talk about mentoring.
Yeah, it's overused to the point where it's almost cliche now, but it's the saying about, people remember how you make them feel.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
It's when you attend to people and you listen to them and you let them speak and you let them feel agency and feel empowered, then you are connecting to them in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and it has to be meaningful, right? It can't be pandering, and so you have to believe it, because, man, I don't care what age group you're working with. The 10-year-olds know when you're insincere. They get it.
And they let you know, too.
Yeah. I mean, so if you're sincere in your music making and in your desire to be helpful, then you're going to be a mentor in what I consider to be the best possible way.
So, Robert, we've been talking some philosophical stuff. Let's talk a little bit about what it is you're doing exactly. Can you tell me about Georgia State and your wind ensemble, and in good times when we're not in pandemic, what does your program look like?
Sure. Well, I've been at Georgia State a long time, and truth be told, when I started the job there, I sort of had in my mind that I'd stay there a year or two, and 19 years later, I'm still there, and really have no intention of going anywhere. It's a great gig. So Georgia State is an enormous university. By some counts, it's the 10th largest in America, 53,000 students. It's huge. And that's on several campuses, and about 36,000 of those are in the downtown campus. Our School of Music has about 400 to 450 music majors. It's a good-sized school. We have 3 full-time band directors. I'm the director of bands. Chester Phillips is the associate director of bands. Devin Reed is the assistant director of bands. And then we have 2 equally important team partners, and that's T.C. McConnell, director of band operations, and Kaylee Bramlett, assistant director of band operations. And now we have 3 concert bands, marching band, basketball band, a winter guard program, and 3 full-time faculty members and a full-time bands operations manager and assistant bands operations manager. So you can attribute none of that to my skill or ability. Football came in 2010, and with football came a whole new renaissance for the band program. So 2001, I started at Georgia State. We had one band. About 5 years later, I split it into two bands. We had recruited enough wind players to have two bands, and it stayed like that until we had football. Then we hired a second and third band director, started a third concert ensemble, started the athletic band program, and it's sort of been firing on all cylinders since then. The wind ensemble has performed at the Southern Division CBDNA regional 3 times. I imagine we'll apply to national at some point. We run a Music for All regional concert festival on our campus, and each year we have 4 high. Are we ready for national? And they seem to think we are. So at some point, we'll throw our name in the hat for national. It's got to be the right year and the right time. So that's the wind ensemble program. We've done a CD. We've had many dozens of guest composers and guest artists. I travel overseas a lot. We've had a lot of guests from Finland, from Hong Kong, from Taiwan, from Canada. So the wind ensemble and really the whole band program see a lot of guest artists. They see a lot of guest composers, a lot of guest conductors. We commission a lot of music. We contributed a track to the GIA recording of the Michael Colgrass Composers Collection. We've had some successes. We've done some interesting things. And the athletic band program that I don't, I guess I technically oversee the whole band program, but Chester Phillips oversees the athletic band program, and they've had wonderful success. Macy's Parade, Obama's inauguration parade. We're supposed to march in the Tournament of Roses parade this year. We'll see if that happens. But there have been some wonderful successes in the band program, and I attribute that to the hard work we have, and my colleagues and the applied faculty who really support the band program a lot. I have great applied colleagues. And we're in a big school, so we can do a lot of things. When you have 53,000 students, there's some advantages to that and some disadvantages to that. But one of the advantages, I think, is resources. So we have some resources available to help us accomplish the things that we want to accomplish there.
So how about you said you founded the Atlanta Chamber Winds and you also conduct the National Chamber Winds. Those are professional ensembles?
They are.
Tell me about those, just really briefly.
Sure. The Atlanta Chamber Winds started in 2006, and I formed it because I wanted to have an outlet to conduct really great players on really great chamber music. So we started in 2006, and it was primarily Georgia State faculty and some freelance musicians. And the lineup of the group has changed a lot in 14 years. There are still a few people that are still in the group that were at the very beginning, but people have come and gone, and we've sometimes, just to keep it interesting, I've invited different people to play. So we've had people from the Atlanta Symphony in the group for periods of time, people in the Atlanta Opera, Atlanta Ballet, freelance musicians, Georgia State faculty. And we typically only do one concert a year. That's what I have the funding for. And I guess any person could say this, I'm just simply too busy to raise money to do more than that. So we do one concert a year. Last year we were invited to play on a series, so we were able to do a couple of concerts. That was really great. We released one CD called Music for Paris that was all previously unreleased French chamberwind music on Albany Records back in, I think, 2008, maybe 2000. I don't remember, 8 or 10, and that still gets played all the time. It's amazing to me. I'll have a friend in Singapore take a screenshot of something that he's listening to. He's like, "This is playing right now," and it's a track from that CD. And then we just finished our second one. It came out on February 1st. It's called Wind Music, and it's a CD of all previously unrecorded American wind music. However, by the time we got it released, it took a few years to raise the money. One of the pieces had actually already been recorded somewhere else, but it has Robert Spital's Consort for 10 Winds, Leslie Bassett's Wind Music, Tim Jansa's Morningsides, Esther Ballow's Suite for Winds, Daniel Pinkham's 5x2, and Ezra Lauterman's octet. And this Esther Ballo piece is just lovely. I mean, I found just handwritten parts, and this is the first recording of it. She was quite a prolific composer living in the DC area in the 50s and 60s. She was a very accomplished pianist. She got arthritis and couldn't play anymore, so she devoted her time to composing and teaching. She had a long career at Catholic University, so I was pleased to be able to do that. And the Bassett piece, I was, this is a real disappointment for me. When we recorded the piece, Leslie was alive. He lived here in Atlanta. Again, you just fall into these things. I had heard that he moved to Atlanta, and I called him, and he invited me to his house, and he and I and his wife just became like friends, like we'd been friends forever. And I told him I was going to record this piece, and we did it, and I couldn't get it released before he and his wife both passed away. But I'm still close friends with his daughter, Wendy, and I was able to send her a couple of copies of it, and she was really thrilled. But that was the reason that piece went on there. So, so that's the Atlanta Chamber Winds. That's the long and short story of us.
So, Robert, how about the National Chamber Winds?
Yeah, so this is, boy, do I just love making music with these folks. This is how that group came to be. Back in 2016, I got a phone call from my friend Paul Bamonte, who had been the conductor of the Ground Forces Army Band here in Atlanta. Before that base closed and they just moved out. He was in D.C. conducting one of the bands, and he said, "Hey, the U.S. Army Field Band is coming through Atlanta, and we always invite a conductor to come conduct one piece. So what do you think of conducting American Salute?" I said, "Great. When's the rehearsal?" He said, "There's no rehearsal. You just come and you stand and you conduct the piece, and it'll be fine." So we did that, and Paul and I hadn't seen each other in like 10 years. So they had a free day the next day here in Atlanta. And I said, "Paul, let's go have some sushi." So we went and had some sushi. And I said, "Paul, it would be great to have you on campus for like a 2 or 3 day residency." Paul was a fine conductor. He had an orchestral conducting degree from somewhere in the Baltimore area. I can't remember, but he was a fine musician. I said, "It would be great for you to speak to the students at Georgia State about careers in the military. You could guest conduct my wind ensemble. You could teach some conducting lessons." He said, "Yeah, that sounds great." He said, "And maybe I could find a way for you to come conduct one of the DC groups on a piece or something." And I said, absolutely no expectation, but that would be great. So maybe 3 or 4 months later, he called me and he said, "Can you get 6 weeks off of work?" And I said, "I'm sure I can't." A month and a half. And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, the U.S. Army Field Band's going on tour, and they want to have you as a guest conductor for the entire tour." And I said, "Wow, okay." So I asked my boss, and he said, "Absolutely. We'll figure it out. There's 2 other full-time band directors. We'll make it work." So this went back and forth for weeks and weeks. There were some funding issues that got resolved. Long story short, it ended up being like a 12-day stint. So they started their tour of the Northeast. I flew and met them in Ohio, and I stayed with them in Ohio, Pennsylvania, up through New York, and then jumped off the tour, and then they kept going. So, I mean, what an experience. They tell me I don't even want to say these words because I can't, there's no way to prove that it's true, but everyone in the group was saying, "You're the first civilian in history to conduct one of the premier groups on tour." I mean, people have guest conducted us, but no one's ever gone on tour with us. So that was supposed to be that half of the agreement. And then Paul was supposed to come down and spend time with me. So I said, "Okay, so Paul, how are we going to do this?" And he said, "Wait, I'm going to leave the military. I've done my 30 years and I'm leaving. So don't worry about it." So we ended up never really doing the other half of it. Okay, so what happened is when I was on tour with these folks, I mean, I was on the road with them, literally riding the bus and hours at a time, and I became really good friends with a bassoonist named Dan Bolts, and he's a fine bassoon player, and he's a guy about my age, and he had 3 children, and we talked a lot about kids and families, and I reconnected with a friend named Sarah Schramm, who had been at Northwestern when I was there. She played in a woodwind quintet with my wife, and she was an oboe player. We became friends again. So I go home. They finish their tour. A couple months later, I call Dan and say, "Hey, you want to put a chamber group together in D.C.?" And he said, "Absolutely." And we decided we would put it together and do one concert, and no one would get paid. We would just do one concert. So I let Sarah and Dan take care of assembling the group. They assembled the group. 3 months later, we played a concert to a packed house. We went out for a drink after, and everybody said, let's keep doing it. And we continue to do it. So that's been an incredible honor to work with those musicians. And the way we've arranged that is we do 2 conducted concerts a year that I fly up there for. And then I set something up where they do 2 or 3 members of concerts, where it's smaller subsets of the group. So we can still use the name of the group, and it's still members of the group, but I'm not having to fly up there 5 times a year to conduct them. And so I don't know what's going to happen at Midwest this year, but we were asked to be the clinic group for the Bob Reynolds conducting workshop, and are scheduled to do a concert on Saturday at Midwest with Bob Reynolds and Mallory Thompson as guest conductors and me as conductor.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's the National Chamberwinds.
So, Robert, you have a couple things going on here in the middle of the COVID-19. Probably the more important one is what we should start with, and that's you're the chair of the College Band Directors National Association COVID-19 Response Committee. Can you talk about the work that CBDNA specifically is doing, or CBDNA is doing, and your committee specifically? What do we have going on, and what should band directors know from this?
Sure. I was what Mark Speed called, the president of CBDNA, and asked me to serve it. I said to him, "Are you sure I'm the right person to do this?" And he said, "Yes." And I accepted. And I was terrified, to be honest, because I knew what a big deal this was. And I knew a lot would be riding on it. And he said, "I need you to assemble a committee, and I need you to write some kind of a document that our colleagues, including our secondary and primary school colleagues, can use and give to administrators." And he said, "I'm totally going to leave you alone. You go get them." So I put together a committee of just the smartest people I knew, the people that I knew could get work done and came from a variety of backgrounds. And they all said yes. No one said no. So we put the committee together and we met on Zoom and we said, okay, I think this is what the document should look like. And we said, okay, we're going to work steadily and we're going to release it on July 1st. Then about a week later, the bottom started falling out of music education. We started to hear stories of band directors being told they weren't going to have jobs, and programs saying you're not going to be able to do band because we don't know what the aerosol production is like. So we, without being told, if I'm being honest, I just said, guys, we're going to have to release this document way earlier. And everyone agreed, and we went from a July 1st release date to May 21st. And we released it on time on May 21st. And the document contains an advocacy statement, and it contains lots and lots of ideas for how to teach in virtual instruction, blended instruction with reduced forces. It has a huge appendix of remote teaching resources. It has an appendix of chamber music. And we've explained that it's a living document, that COVID-19 is changing daily. Plus, we worked really fast to get this thing out because so many people needed it. So absolutely, there's going to be things that we missed. So we put a link in the document. By the way, it can be found on the CBDNA website, cbdna.org. We put a link to the document to a Google form and said, if you have any suggestions or edits, bring them on. And some people have, and they've been really helpful. In general, very constructive and very helpful comments. So we will continue to update the document probably every couple weeks for as long as we feel we need to, and as long as we're getting new and really great information. So then we did 2 other things. We formed a group on Facebook. It's CBDNA COVID-19 Forum, and it's a private group, but if you search for it, you can find it, and everybody gets in. The person who set it up, it wasn't me, just set it up as a private group for some reason. Probably shouldn't have, but once you have a private group and you have people in it, we've learned you can't then make it public. That's in order to protect the privacy of people who thought they were in a private group, and that makes sense. But anyway, it's a private group, but it has like 1,400 or 1,500 members already in like a week. and that's a place to share information as well. And then we've been running open forums for anyone who's interested about our document. So we can talk about the document or do Q&A. And we had the first of those maybe 2 days ago, and I think we had 170 people come. And we'll do two more of those forums, one on June 2nd, one on June 3rd, to just talk about the document. So the bulk of our work is done, getting that document out, but we will continue to be a committee and we'll continue to meet and we'll continue to make revisions to that document as long as we continue to get great data from people. And I don't sense that that's going to slow down because there is quite a bit of data out there. But I do have to say, even something that's probably way more important than what we did is what Mark Speed is doing. Mark Speed is the president of CBDNA, and he's teamed with James Weaver at NFHS, which National Federation of High Schools. Is that right? Something? And there we go. They have raised in 2.5 weeks $220,000 for a scientific study on the dispersals of aerosols when playing wind instruments. And they start tomorrow. The study starts tomorrow. I mean, I have never seen something move so fast in all my life, and I have never seen someone raise that much money in that amount of time. But Mark and James just put the pedal to the metal and got like 40 organizations to pitch in money, and they raised over 200 grand. So they have enough money for the study at University of Colorado and the follow-up replicated study, which I think is going to be at the University of Maryland. Simultaneously, some folks at Colorado State University with Rebecca Phillips, who's the director of bands there, we're also creating a study. So they're also going to run a study that's going to be similar in scope, but slightly different from the CU Boulder one. So there's going to be 2 studies on aerosol dispersals and wind instruments and voice and other things too, pretty close to each other in Colorado, interestingly. So we hope to have some preliminary data soon, but the studies themselves won't conclude until the middle of the fall. So it's not, we're not going to have stuff early enough to tell administrators definitively about the entire study, but we should have some information, because I can tell you, my experience seems to be that most administrators think that band and choir are over. They're not basing this in fact. They're just basing it in hearsay and articles where they're saying, well, a choir in Seattle got together and 109 of them got COVID-19. And that is true. That did happen. But no one has linked the singing to that yet. They're just making assumptions that that's what it is. So we want to give them hard data. And if the data is bad news, it's bad news. But we need to know before we can problem solve, right? We can't just guess. So we need to know what the situation is going to be. So these 2 studies, I think, are incredibly important. And we'll start to see some results from those fairly soon, and then full results later in the fall.
Yeah. So I know you and I had a conversation before we started. I teach at a private school. I had a conversation with my principal, and, we're talking about various ways that we can do band with 4th and 5th graders. And I think I'm going to have to lose a year of beginners and just start them as 5th graders instead of 4th graders this year, because I just don't see how I'm going to start beginners, especially if we lock down again.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the sooner these things come out, the better.
Yeah, I fear for a year without beginners.
Well, we'll just start them later. We'll just have a year that's behind.
It would really be terrible to not start them for a year. And I hope that doesn't happen. I want to mention, everyone knows Robert W. Smith, the composer. He is working so much and so fast behind the scenes. I mean, he's just that kind of a guy. He doesn't want credit for anything. But I mean, I'm on the phone with him every day, and he's telling me about, okay, I'm talking to some administrators in Las Vegas today, and the next day it was Missouri, and the next day it was Maryland, and he's on top of this, and he's working with another organization to release a document too. And then, of course, we have to acknowledge ABA and what they're doing with their mentoring program, and they've released a document too. So there's so many great organizations all getting together here and just saying, look, we're all in this together. We're a team, and let's empower directors as much as we possibly can to have something to say when it's time to sit down at the table and say something.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about the way the podcast is kind of asynchronous. It's possible that 10 years from now, someone's listening to this with the retrospect of history, or the what am I trying to say, with the focus of history on what we're talking about. I'm wondering, what do you think is going to be the positive takeaway? Let's not talk about the negative, what we might lose. What are we going to gain from this?
Well, I always try to look at it that way, and I think this is a time full of opportunity for us. I can tell you one thing I've already seen in my own teaching. We were at Georgia State, and it was March 12th, and I said to my wind ensemble, guys, I hope we have rehearsal tomorrow. See ya. And we didn't. And that was it. It just literally ended that day like that. So we had 2 weeks to figure out how to move our curriculum online. And man, I'm not the world's most creative person when it comes to things like that, but I thought of some really interesting things to do, and so have thousands and thousands of other people. So I think we found ways to teach in ways that we hadn't before. And I think, at least temporarily, at least for this past spring, knowing we weren't going to have any concerts, we just couldn't have them, we focused on process instead of product. And I don't think I've always just focused on product. At least I hope I haven't. For me, the journey is as rewarding as the destination. But I think we have an opportunity here to teach and do the things that we've always said, I just don't have time to do that because I've got a concert. So I think there's great opportunity in those places. And as a byproduct of all this, there's tremendous opportunity in collegiality and watching all of these groups work together. And it's not that there's ever been competition between NBA and ABA and CBDNA and NAFME and NASM and CMS. It's never been competitive, but I've never seen this level of cooperation between all these groups either. Everybody's just saying, yeah, we're all fighting for the same thing. And if you want to talk about it, I can mention something else I'm involved in called the Creative Repertoire Initiative, with 10 composers who have said, hey, we're going to create music for the fall, and we're going to create flexible music and it's not really like flex music like you think about. It's sort of a different concept, and I can talk about this later if you want. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I don't want anyone to feel like I'm using this as a platform to promote these composers at the expense of other composers. But this group of composers said, we're going to find a way to do this. So they're creating in new ways that they've never done before. And man, it's not easy. These are 10 composers of the highest order, and some of them are saying, this is hard, man. It's hard to say, if 2 flutes and an oboe and a bass clarinet show up, this piece has to be performable by those 4 players, or any other combination, 3 piccolos and a flute, or 2 trombones and a tuba and a bass drum. And they're creating pieces like this. So the goal of that group, we can talk about it later if you want, is to create this flexible music and to inspire other composers to do the same thing. So our website is going to contain sample scores and templates, and these composers are going to basically open up their toolbox and show it to other composers and say, this is what we did, guys. Why don't you do the same thing? So they're going to try to help support and amplify the voices of other composers to do the same kind of thing.
Everyone's working on it.
Well, this group of composers is deeply dedicated to the band directors, and they're going to find a way to have some music available by July 15th. And I hope they inspire others to do the same thing. And I want to be clear that this isn't an exclusive club and it's just us and no one else can do it. We're not going to be a clearinghouse for composers, and our website is going to be a very basic stripped down thing. And we're basically going to run this off of a Facebook page. But they want to amplify other composers and show them what they're doing so that others can say, I can do this too, and build an even broader repertoire for these band directors who, may end up with 4 or 5 people in the classroom. Michael Doherty told us either his daughter or his daughter-in-law is a teacher in the Ann Arbor schools, and they said there's going to be eight kids in the classroom, and that's it. And the teachers are going to rotate in and out of that class, and the rest of the students are going to be at home. And then on Tuesday, a different 8 are going to come in. And, I'm flipping that over in my head, and I don't see any place for a large ensemble in that setting. Unless you can convince the principle that he chooses those 8 people based on your wind octet in your wind ensemble, which just seems highly unlikely. I don't mean to make light of it by it sounding like I'm laughing. It's just how preposterous the notion of even asking that would be. So we're going to be in a tough situation in some places in this fall, and in other places, hopefully, a really great situation. I think it will vary widely, you know?
Yeah, it's going to change. I think it's going to be very fluid. And we don't have a good handle on this thing.
For sure.
Yeah, it's really, I think that uncertainty eats away at people's confidence too.
Yeah.
I think to me, that's what's victimized me the most is that sort of deterioration of that confidence and, sort of the regularity of a schedule,
Well, I mean, absolutely. Yeah. It's, I was working off a piece of paper hanging on the wall for weeks because I was never going to my computer for that kind of thing. So I didn't even think of it, and it's without that schedule. And some days you don't even know what day it was. And, it's, I think maybe band directors, this is a wide stereotype, but maybe we have some degree of control to us, control freak personality kind of thing.
Yeah.
And this is just out of our hands. And I can only speak for myself and a lot of my close friends who I've talked to. I don't know many adults who've had a full night of sleep in the last 6-8 weeks.
Oh, it's crazy. I thought I was the only one. Every morning I wake up and go, I'm still tired.
Yeah, and it's 3:15. I mean, most of us are not, at least my friend group, are not sleeping very well.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
I heard today on NPR that nearly a quarter of the workforce is unemployed. I mean, that's staggering. Something like 695,000 claims was the previous record, and now we're over 2 million. It almost tripled. More than something. So
it's crazy times, that's for sure. But we're going to come out stronger from this. I have to believe that.
I think so. And look, I'm seeing tremendous humanity. I'm involved. It's funny. I have no gigs, and I've never been busier. And I truly mean that. I've never been busier because between the COVID-19 chairing that committee and everything that's around that, our work is still going on. And being part of this creative repertoire initiative and running the Digital Directors Lounge, I'm as busy as I've ever been, but I think the world needs these things. They need a COVID-19 document that they can look at. And it's funny, the emails I'm getting more from public and private school people than I am from CBDNA people saying how much they appreciate the document. So it seems like, the committee and I have done some good there at least. And this creative repertoire initiative is going to result in actual pieces of music. And the Digital Directors Lounge just gives people humanity at a time when they need it.
Let's talk about the Digital Directors Lounge. So I've only been able to tune into one because there's always something for me on Tuesday night else going on. Sure. But tell me about that. How did that start and what was the inspiration for that?
Well, I guess it's been several weeks now. I don't even know how many shows we've done, maybe 6 or 7. But I said I made a conscious decision, and I said it started locally here in Georgia, and I said I want to be a leader in the state of Georgia. I've been here 19 years. People know me. I think people trust me for the most part, and I want to step up and show some leadership here. So I contacted 2 good friends of mine, and I said, let's do an online forum for Georgia band directors. This is pathetic. I don't even remember what we called it, but we called it something that first week. It was only a few weeks ago. It feels like a lifetime ago. And we just had a little rap session with Georgia band directors, and it was basically an opportunity for us to get together and talk and share ideas and have some humanity. And I don't remember, there may be 100 people or 80 people or something like that. So then I went to bed that night really excited, and I woke up at 3 a.m. like I do. And when I tell you, when it comes to like creating names or having like vision like this, that is not my thing. Like, I'm a recreator. I arrange a lot of music for publishers, so I can arrange, but I can't write original music. I can interpret someone else's music, but I couldn't write that music. So I consider myself a recreator, not a creator. But for some reason, I was up at like 3:15 in the morning, and I said, the Digital Directors Lounge, and I'm going national. And I called my two friends the next day and I said, guys, I'm going national. Do you want to do this with me? And they said, absolutely. And I said, okay. And I called it the Digital Directors Lounge. And I called Dick and Cheryl Floyd and I said, will you guys be my first guest? And they said, absolutely. And so we did that with Dick and Cheryl, and there were like 100 people. And I think I only had capacity for 100 then. And then we had to turn people away. And then a donor said, I don't want you to turn anyone away, so take this donation and up the room size. So then the room size went up to 300. Next week we had Mallory Thompson, and I think we had, no, maybe we still didn't have it. We had like 100 in the room and like 200 streaming online. And then the next week we had John Mackey and Brian Ballmages, and we had like 300 people. And it just kept growing and growing. And I have to say this about my guests: not one person has said no. Not one person. Every single person I've asked to do it has said yes, and they've said yes instantly because people just want to give. And it's funny, this may be bad in the long run. I don't know, but it's like our time it doesn't even have a value anymore. People are just giving themselves away. And at some point, that's going to have to stop, right? I mean, you can't do it for free forever.
Right.
So far, it's been that way. And here's the lineup in June. I mean, it's ridiculous. Paula Kreider, June 2nd. June 9th, Julie Giroux and Omar Thomas. June 16th, Tim Lotzenheiser. June 23rd, Gary Green and Eric Whitaker. June 16th, Johan DeMay and Peter Meakin. It's like the best of the best. And they are all saying, absolutely, no problem, let's do it. But, it's a ton of work. I have a friend who does all the flyers for me and everything, and I mostly promote it through Facebook. But, you have to contact every guest, and you have to give them, your set of questions, and this is how I like to run the show. And then you have to promote it, and then you have to put a picture up afterwards and say what a great night it was, and then line up your next guest and send thank you notes. And it's not as easy as just doing a show every Tuesday night. So it's been honestly one of the highlights of my week every week. And I love the way the guests interact with each other. I had Alfred Watkins and Richard Saucedo together. I had Lowell Graham and Jason Fetting together, and Ballmages and Mackey together. And this last week was Frank Ticelli and Alex Shapiro. I was going to have Alex in June by herself, but Frank called me and said, hey, I just saw the May poster, and I'm the only one who's alone. I don't want to be alone. And I said, well, you're alone, Frank, because you're a superstar, and you can carry the show alone. A lot of them actually could, in fairness. But he said, no, I don't want to be alone. And I said, well, I was going to ask Alex Shapiro in June. He said, she's great. Let's do it together. And they had just such a genuine rapport with each other, and so much grace and so much humanity. And I think that's why people come back. I mean, we're seeing, 160, 200, 300 people every week. So it's sticking with people in some way. And I know that the Minority Band Directors National Association is doing a series of master classes, and I think they're going to wrap up in the next few weeks. And I know Travis Cross has a really great program on Thursday nights too. And I think he's getting close to, he keeps saying that this week is going to be his last week. And I think this one or next week will be. And so then the Digital Directors Lounge will be the one that's sort of still going, and we'll continue to go as long as there's an interest in it. I don't know, maybe it'll stop sometime, but for now we're going to keep going.
So Robert, way back in the beginning of the conversation, I put a little star by the word travel. Can you help me out there? You mentioned that you travel a lot. Why did I put a star by that?
Well, I do travel a lot, and I consider myself really lucky to be asked to do engagements, and I enjoy the traveling a lot. It's tough being away from my family. It's tough being away from my ensemble, but I do get out there a fair bit. The three places that I visit a lot are Finland, Taiwan, and Canada. And I think I just finished, and actually right as things were starting to fall apart, I was in Finland. It was my 14th visit to Finland. I was there from, I want to make sure I get this right, the very end of February I think I came home on March 8th. And while I was there for 8 or 9 days, I was conducting the Finnish Navy Band. It was my fourth time conducting them. And I was reading the newspapers in the morning and seeing this, coronavirus. starting to like really think in the back of my mind, man, am I going to get home? Like, am I going to be stuck in Finland? Your mind can start to do crazy things. And I got home, and a week later, the world changed really dramatically. It already had changed in some places, but in the U.S. it started to. So, this whole thing with Finland started years ago, where I got a grant to bring some Finnish musicians to Georgia State, and I did, and we had a couple of concerts, and the consul general from New York City came and spent a few days in Atlanta, and we had packed houses because there's actually a big Finnish community here in Atlanta. I hadn't known that until then. And then that led to an engagement to conduct the Finnish Navy Band, and then it just keeps rolling to the point where I'm going 3 or 4 times a year now. So I was just there in February, and my next engagement, who knows if it's going to happen or not. I'm supposed to conduct the Finnish Army Band in Lapland on an all-American concert on 9/11. Interestingly, a lot of the groups over there are starting to get together already, full group. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So they've told me on July 1 they'll make a decision about that. And then in October, I'm going to Kokkola, which is a small town up about 5-hour train ride from Helsinki, where I do a conducting workshop with my friend Sami Rusafori. He's the chief conductor of the Helsinki Police Band, and he and I collaborate frequently. So we'll be doing a conducting workshop up there in October. And, each time I go, I'll end up meeting with some people, and another gig or two comes down the pike. So it's kind of just been constant now. And I've gotten to know many Finns, and I have a publisher now that publishes a lot of my transcriptions of Finnish music, Fennica German. It's one of the biggest publishing companies in Finland. So it's been the source of a lot of great inspiration and a lot of great friendships and a lot of great music making. The second place I go a lot is Taiwan. I don't think I've been there 14 times, but probably 10, conducting various university ensembles, doing conducting workshops, things like that. And I'm probably in Canada 2 or 3 times a year. So those are the places I go a fair bit. I fly about 125,000 miles a year, so it's a fair bit of travel. Conduct a lot in the States too, but I have a wife who's incredibly supportive, and she's a musician, which I think helps a lot. She's the flute professor at our university and a great freelance flute player here in Atlanta. And she just says, you do what you need to do. And so, yeah, there's a lot of travel happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. My wife is a cello professor at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, in Bulgarian. And so we tend to go to Bulgaria quite often in Eastern Europe. And
have you heard the great Bulgarian voices sing?
Oh yeah, that's an amazing musical country. Musical country. It's a what did I hear someone describe it as? A musical culture that's like a foot wide but a mile deep. Really great.
I mean, I don't know much about it, but I do know the great Bulgarian voices with this throat singing that they do. That's just extraordinary. And
they sing
end really. They end all these phrases in major seconds. It's like unresolved dissonances, and it's just it rips your heart out.
They sing up in the front of their face. It's very nasally.
Yeah, it's really, really cool.
Yeah, it is. It is, and it's all in like 7/8, but it's not like 2 + 2 + 3. It's 2 + 2 + 2 + 1.
Yeah, right.
So it really, it messes with you a little bit.
I'd like to know more about the music of that country.
Yeah, it's just really cool. I still want to really write a band piece in that 7/8 style where it's da 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 da. You know, that kind of like that added beat. It's not a group of 3; it's its own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
I like that 2 + 2 + 2 + 1. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you could drop it out sometimes.
Yeah.
Haha.
3, 3, 4.
Yeah. Just put that extra beat in sometimes. But that'll be a grade 6.
Yeah, probably will.
All right, Robert. So I think we've talked a lot, and I think it's probably time to get to our final group of questions.
Okay.
I ask these of everyone because I want to kind of collect this. I feel like it's the most important thing I do is to collect this repository of ideas from a variety of people. And the first of the questions is, where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
Boy, that's a really difficult question. I, I personally only involve myself in festivals and things of that nature that I think are healthy. So I rarely adjudicate festivals that have first, second, and third prize. I think some degree of that is maybe okay, but art is so subjective. When you run a race, the person who finishes first is first. There's no art to it. It's science. The fastest score, the fastest time wins. But our world is so different than that, and it's so subjective. And I certainly don't want to discredit competition because I think it does have some benefits if it's used, sparingly and occasionally. But I mean, who are we to even judge what's better than something else? I mean, I guess some things are cut and dry. Your group's either in tune or out of tune. But one thing I've learned is I want to empower directors to have interpretations of things, and I don't care if I agree with their interpretation. I just want them to have something to say. And I worry that maybe sometimes competition stifles that part of our creative spirit. Uh, and I'm not saying we should be reckless and take a piece that's marked at 120 at 186 just to be different. It has to come from thorough study and daydreaming the music and knowing how you want it to sound. But I'm at a point in my life where I want to encourage courage. That's not a very eloquent way to say it, but I want to encourage people to have an opinion and say, darn it, this is how I feel, and I'm going to do it without worrying about whether the students that they conduct are going to be penalized for it by an adjudicator. You know what I mean? So I think, I don't know that exactly answers the question that you're asking, but I think philosophically, I want to be involved in things that empower directors to have courage to make interpretive decisions and draw a line in the sand and say, this is how I feel about it. I tell my own conducting students, the worst thing you could ever say to me is you were bored. If you hate my interpretation, I can live with that because you've had a visceral experience with it. But to say, whatever, that's death for me. I mean, why? Let's not even get out of bed in the morning if that's the reaction we're invoking from people. So I want to find. I'm saying the same thing over and over, and I apologize for that. I'm sure it's not good for your program, but I want to empower musicians to take risks and take chances as conductors, as musicians, and I think sometimes the fear of competition does the opposite or has the potential to.
All right, Robert. So this is the question that tends to not get answered well by most musicians, but how do you find a work-life balance in your career?
I'm not sure that I do, if I'm being really honest. I think I work more than I should, and I I invest a lot in my family when I can, and that's frequently. But there are times I'm in front of the computer working when it's a constant gnawing that I should be with my kids because they're not going to be here that long. And, one's going to be out of the house in 7 years and the other one shortly thereafter. Or, I not need to, I want to spend time with my wife. I think for me, it's a constant feeling of not living up to all the things that I'm supposed to be. So I don't think I have struck the right balance because I think if I had, I wouldn't feel that way. I'm blessed with a wife who understands me and understands my work ethic, and she admires it. It doesn't. I've never ever heard the words from her, "You're working too much," or "I wish you wouldn't take this gig." And I always ask. I never take a gig without asking her, and she never says no. So in some ways, I'm enabled to continue to do more and more and more and more. And there's a cost for that. There's an emotional cost in your own mental health. You can only do so many things, and your personal health. And but I don't cut corners with my family. And when I choose my family, I know I've made the right choice always. So I think it could be distilled down to that simple statement. When I choose my family, I know I've made the right choice. I've never chosen my family and said, "Man, I wish I was working right now." I might have a gnawing feeling that, man, I got to get back to that. But it's never like, I really wish I was doing that instead of being with them. It's never been that way. I'm blessed with two daughters that I love more than anything, and a wife that I, couldn't live without. So do I have balance? I don't think I do. I mean, I work every weekend. I work constantly. I'm up in the middle of the night working. So I, I don't have the right balance, but I've made it work here, and I have a family that understands. And as often as I possibly can, I try to do the right thing.
All right, Robert, this is a big question, and we've talked a lot about the immediate challenges we're facing, but how about in the long term? And I don't know if this answer is going to be changing in the next year. That scares me a little bit. But what are the challenges facing band or music education, and how can we best meet them?
I mean, the challenge right now is, how do we stay in the curriculum? And, I'm sure someone in 1952 could have given you the same answer, but they would have meant it in a totally different way, right? How do we stay in the curriculum when we might have 8 people in the room at a time? How do we stay in the curriculum when they know that because of social distancing, they need more teachers in classrooms helping to provide instruction? I mean, I'm sure you're hearing what I'm hearing, school districts that are saying phys ed and fine arts, all of those teachers are now assistant teachers to the other teachers. And that's just not happening for a year.
Well, I know. Oops, sorry. Go ahead. I'm so sorry. I was just going to say, I just found out that the other specialists in my school are going to be traveling to the classrooms instead of the kids coming to them.
Yeah.
I'm the only exception because of the equipment.
Yeah. Well, I think
anyway,
you count yourself lucky, honestly.
Yeah, but if I have to go teach general music, then that's what I'm going to do. These kids are going to get a music education. That's the imperative.
They're going to get a music education, but I wonder if it'll ever flip back. We're talking about, I talked to the director of the School of Music at Georgia State today, and we were talking about, the budget cuts, which of course are coming. And honestly, I think all things considered, I think we're going to have it better than a lot of places. And I'm not saying it's good. It's not good. But he was saying, understand, these budget cuts are not for 1 year. These are permanent budget cuts. Permanent. We'll never see this money again. So we're going to be operating lean forever. It's not. I've been at Georgia State 19 years. I've never seen someone say, hey, we're going to up your budget this year, ever. They don't do that. I remember when fuel costs went up and the airline said, just temporarily, because fuel costs are up, we're going to add baggage fees. And I remember Clark Howard saying, if you believe that that's temporary, you are disillusioned. And of course, here we are. 15 years later, we still have those fees. So the changes that could happen now, and I, as the head of this committee, I've been trying to be as positive as possible, but I'm worried that any changes that are made might be permanent. They may say, hey, folks, things seem okay like this. Maybe we'll just continue without fine arts. I can't imagine that we'll continue without sports, but I can see in some places that people just saying, let's just do without it. So that's a crisis, and that's right now. And I can't even think beyond that to the future. And maybe I'm copping out of the question a little bit, but I'm working tirelessly with friends and colleagues and people like Robert Smith to figure out how we save band programs now, and how we can empower directors to have a seat at the table. You know who Alan McMurray is? Yeah, Alan said the most profound thing I've ever heard. He said, when I was at University of Colorado, I always made sure to go to meetings. And people would say, Alan, you've been here 30 years. You don't have to go to meetings anymore. And I told them, you bet I'm going to go to that meeting, because if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And oh my God, that just hit me like a ton of bricks. What a great expression. But we need to make sure that these band directors are not on the menu. They need to be at the table. And I think if they're not, in some places, it would be easy to just move to a new norm and then have that new norm be the norm. And so I think we've got to fight like crazy right now. And I think we have to use every opportunity we can to advocate for ourselves and I think I've seen a lot of people sort of waiting for a magic answer, and there's no magic answer, and everyone's going to have to be their own best advocate. But what we can do in the profession is try to provide things for them to serve their advocacy needs, documents and advocacy statements and mentoring or whatever else we can do. But, until we get through this, I can't, I just can't see beyond where we'll be. Like I said earlier, I see great hope, and I see the possibility for great change and innovation in delivery of instruction and new ways of delivering musicianship skills to young musicians. But we've got to get through this right now, and we've got to emerge on the other side with our programs intact. And that takes more than just being able to teach a fingering on bassoon. It takes skill, and it takes savvy, and it takes politicking sometimes. So let's empower our peers to do as best they can with that, and then let's evaluate in 6 months and see where we are.
Yeah, and the, you and I were talking beforehand too, is the more creative solutions you can offer to the administration that leaves the structure in place so that it can return, the better. If it just keep the band doesn't go away, it's just the way we teach it for a year changes.
And for goodness sakes, have solutions.
Yeah, have a plan.
Principal and say, I don't know what to do, because they're going to say, I know what to do.
Yeah.
Help trench this year. Have solutions, and this is not the time to wait for someone else to tell you. I sound preachy. I don't mean to be preachy.
Well, I know. I mean, I don't want to give away. I don't want to talk, out of school, quite literally in this case, but I don't want to give my business away. But, I talked to you about the conversation I had with my principal. If I hadn't been proactive in having that conversation, next year would have been different for me. And so you just have to take that. You have to take that chance.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to have a seat at that table.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Robert. So I just invented a time machine, and I set the date to your high school graduation. What are you telling yourself?
What am I telling myself?
Yeah.
Yeah. Be kind. Be kind to people. Be collaborative with people. I'm going to grab this book right here because it's in front of me. This book is called The Art of Possibility by Rosamund Zander and Ben Zander. Ben Zander is an orchestral conductor based in Boston, and Rosamund is his wife, who's a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And they wrote this amazing book called The Art of Possibility. And chapter 6 is rule number 6. That's the name of the chapter. And when you turn to chapter 6, which I'm going to do right now, and I want to read it exactly the way he wrote it. Actually, I can't, because it says a word in it that I don't want to say on a podcast. I'll leave that word out. Rule number 6 is don't take yourself so seriously. And it's a great rule to live by, because I think when you take yourself seriously and the ego becomes involved, when we make decisions from the ego rather than from the heart and from the place of kindness, we tend to make not as good of decisions. So I would say, don't take yourself so seriously, be kind, and I would wish I had had more courage back then to believe in what I wanted. Those 3 things.
That's something that I preach to my kids all the time, is be kind.
Absolutely. It doesn't cost you anything. My wife says, of all the things you can be in the world, be kind.
Yeah, it opens up so many doors. It opens up every door.
Yeah, I've learned kindness from her, and I've learned kindness from our children. And without oversharing, we lost a son quite far along in a pregnancy, and I've turned that horrific experience into a way to find kindness in myself and in others. So it's more profound to me now than ever, and I think we need it in the world now more than ever, when so many people are terrified and just don't know what's going on. It'd be interesting to listen to this podcast in 20 years and see what's going on in the world. We're smacked out of a pandemic. Whoever would have imagined?
I just hope they're not saying, "Wow, they actually had large ensemble band in 2020."
They're not going to. We're not. It won't disappear. It can't. The world needs it. It's not going to disappear. It may in some places, but and I hope it's not permanent. But we're a resilient bunch, and we're a smart bunch, and we have each other's backs, and we're going to get through this.
All right, if you had a choice, what would be the final work for wind ensemble or band that you would conduct, and why?
It actually would be a chamber piece. It would be Mozart's Gran Partita, because I think it's the greatest piece of wind music ever written. It had to have been written by God. It could not have been written by a human being. It's just not possible. If you look at the manuscript, it's insane that there's no mistakes or cross outs. He's just literally writing what he's hearing. And the Anton Stadler, the clarinet player, and his brother were having a benefit concert for themselves, and they asked him to write this like short little work, like 5 minutes, and he wrote an hour-long piece for an outdoor performance. We don't know how many of the movements were performed, or I don't know how many were performed at the premiere, but I think it was like 3 or 4 of them. But it reveals itself in different ways every time I study it. And I've had the fortune to conduct it 3 times now, and I could spend the rest of my life conducting that piece and live happily. There is so much in there. I just did it on a tour of churches in Finland. I did it twice in 2 different churches in Finland, and each performance was just so magical because the musicians, of course, know what they're playing and they get it. And the audience, even if they don't get it, they're hearing things that they've never heard before. And it's as fresh now as it was when it was written. And I'm stumbling over my words because it's hard to quantify something that's written by someone that's not a human. I don't know how to put it into terms. So I would say the Mozart Gran Partita, and I would say if it was a full band piece, it would likely be something like Maslanka's Fourth Symphony. And the reason I say that piece is it's the most visceral reaction I've ever had to a piece in my life. And maybe I'm sharing too much here, but I did it a few years ago, maybe more than a few, at Georgia State. And I will never forget walking off stage, going backstage into the dressing room, and just bursting into tears. And to this day, I don't know why. I don't know why I burst into tears, but there was something about standing in front of that for 30 minutes that was so extraordinary. It may not have even been the world's best performance. I actually don't remember, but it was just something about that piece. And I had written my dissertation on David. I had lived at his house for a week with him, and his voice is so compelling and so unique and so powerful. That piece has had quite an impact on me. So I'm going to cheat and I'm going to give you 2 answers. So the Gran Partita would be the first half of the concert, and then the second half would be Maslanka's Fourth Symphony.
All right, Robert, this is an odd question given our circumstance, but is there anything coming up you'd like to share or promote?
It's funny. I mean, in normal circumstances, I'd have tons of stuff, but everything's been canceled.
And we've kind of talked about the things you're doing already, so it's...
Yeah, I mean, I've got these couple of gigs in Finland coming up. I've got a few honor bands, whatever, nothing out of the ordinary. I'm doing a bunch of transcriptions for my Finnish publisher of some, I just finished a Sibelius piece. I'm doing a couple by some lesser-known composers outside of Finland, but composers who are known really well in Finland, and those are... These transcriptions seem to be doing quite well. People are kind of hungry to do some band music in Finland by Finnish composers. I've got those going, and this creative repertoire initiative, and being the band liaison for that, the conductor liaison, and the COVID-19 stuff, and the digital directors lounge. But it's a strange time. I mean, normally now I'd be booked for most of next year, and there's no one knows. No one even knows if they're going to have budgets to bring guest conductors. Never mind whether concerts can even happen. So it's the strangest of times to answer that question. I can tell you this: the one thing that this has given, as busy as I've been, is it's given time for reflection. which I think is so important and we get so infrequently in our lives, time to just sit and reflect. And I have found that to be a wonderful thing for me personally, to just say, okay, is this the direction I want? Are these the things I want to pursue musically? Or should I be not doing those things and doing these things instead? Working on being a father, working on being a husband, all those kinds of things. So, what do I have to look forward to? What things are coming up? More reflection and becoming a better person, I hope.
All right, Robert, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, I mean, my digital footprint is enormous, so it's not difficult. The easiest way is email robertambrose@gsu.edu. I also have a website, robertjambrose.com, that's embarrassingly out of date right now that I need to update, and will do that. But that's the easiest way. I'm on Facebook, though I'm nearing the 5,000 friend limit, so I don't know how many more friends I'll be able to take. I don't know what happens when you hit 5,000. I think you just can't take any more. If people friend request me, I always accept it unless it's just someone I have no idea who they are at all. And I do communicate a lot with people through Facebook, but email the old-fashioned way still works great. robertambrose@gsu.edu.
Robert, thank you so much.
I can't thank you enough for a great night. It's really been wonderful talking to you, and thanks for having me on the program.